Greetings from the United Arab Emirates, and thank you, Ranjit and Palipara Foundation, for inviting me to the 8th edition of this very interesting and unique forum. Ecology is economy. To me, is not a paradigm but a reality that we need to embrace and believe in. From centuries, nature has provided and continues to do so services to humanity, leading to development, growth, well-being, and prosperity of nations. Nature has always been resilient, but to a limit, unfortunately, the pace of development with the utter lack of respect to it breaking that resilience, impacting its ability to provide those services and unleashing its fury in form of fire, floods, and pandemics. With nearly half of the world's GDP dependent on services provided by nature, it is in our interest and in the interest of our planet and its future generations. To me, valuing nature as a capital resource is not a choice, but a necessity, and hence integrating nature in all economic and developmental equation is a fundamental to a more sustainable solutions to many of the problems we face today and the world so desperately needs. Ecology should underpin all economic developmental aspiration, and it's only then we would be able to create an equitable and stable social and political environment for businesses and communities to grow. On the issue of diseases, you all know that zoonotic diseases such as SARS, MERS, avian flu, and many others had devastating impacts in economies and human health. The current COVID pandemic has taught us a lesson which we must learn from. Economic cost from zoonotic diseases is huge. The COVID pandemic is estimated to have cost the world in trillions of dollars and still counting, far more than the investment needed to prevent the spread. According to a World Economic Forum report, pandemics will cause average annual economic losses of 0.7% of global GDP in coming decades. If we continue to ignore the warnings from the recent pandemics, and continue to destroy our forests, wetlands, and other natural ecosystems. In doing so, we are exposing the humanity to diseases which not only have huge economic impact, but enormous social and mental impacts. I believe the best way to lower the risk is to stop destruction of habitats and rather reforest and rewild them. This is exactly what we are trying to do here in Abu Dhabi by ensuring we set aside protected areas, protect threatened species, and actively restore mangroves, fish stocks, and degraded habitats. I have never been to Himalayas, but I have no doubt that the landscape, its natural beauty, and challenges the region face will inspire and encourage all of you, ecologists, economists, planners, and decision makers, and indigenous communities to find ways to bridge the gap between the ecology and economy and create a template for ecology is economy. Thank you and best wishes for successful forum.
So we have two questions for you, all related to the theme for this year, which is ecology is economy.
Yeah.
And the first question that I have for you is why and how should ecology be at the center stage of any economic development? I mean, why should we see it as the foundation for any country's economy?
Because planet Earth is not some kind of asteroid on which we have decided to go and do mining while retreat home. This is home. So if you start consuming your own home, soon you won't have a home. And besides which, Herman Daly, I think it was, who said that the economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment. So it's self-explanatory, actually. It's
Right.
yeah.
Right. So, but from all our experiences, and I'm sure you would be the best judge of it. I feel that people don't consider that. Of course, there's a dichotomy in terms of uh, uh, social impact and what people need in society, especially rural India currently. So how do we sort of advocate for the same? I mean, how do we advocate in certain pockets of the country, stating that our ecology is a source of income, and we cannot go about destroying it?
So let me put it like this. We talk of rural futures, but I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for some urbanite to come and feed me in rural India. It's the other way around. Rural India feeds urban India. Apart from that, look at what's happened today. There is a report called the IPBES report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And scientists, medical experts, biologists, you name it, climatologists, they've all come to a very clear conclusion now that the same damage that we have done to our biosphere, which caused climate change, is the one that has caused the pandemic, COVID 19. Not only that, they're saying thousands of more pandemics are waiting in the wings. Why? Because we have decided to undervalue the the natural capital that we have, and that natural capital is represented by rivers, by forests, by lakes, by aquifers, by glaciers. The Eastern Himalaya is possibly the last repository of real wild India, or the real wildness of the Indian subcontinent. And now, if we start misusing this capital, then we will fall victim to a very simple economic principle. If you undervalue an asset, you are destined to lose it. But this doesn't mean all is black. The hard fact is that today, if you take stock of India, 8 or 10 months after the pandemic hit, we've lost billions of dollars. The world has lost trillions of dollars in the hope that GDP might rise by destroying this forest, that wetland, that grassland, that river, that dam, that creating that by destroying our natural capital to bump up GDP by a small amount, we have lost a chunk of our economic security. So what is being said right now is that the solutions for economic development now are not going to be available to us if we break economic rules. And economic rules say what? It means expand your capital, live off your interest. But what is natural capital? Our natural capital is the one that's shrinking the most. And we are creating these economic edifices, which are actually like white elephants. You look at the dams in India, we're the world's largest, one of the world's largest large dam builders. And virtually every single dam in India is dying early. So its cost benefit ratios are quasi fiction. Because they die earlier, automatically the amortization of the investment over 100 years is now to be amortized over 30 years. So they're 3 times more expensive than they ever were. And they were supposed to do what? Generate power, give irrigation to us, uh, control floods, control droughts. But these things were at loggerheads with each other. How can you generate power unless you keep the reservoir full? If you keep the reservoir full, how can that reservoir be a balancer against the floods that come in? To do flood control, you need to keep the reservoir levels low. So the industry inevitably trumps, and that's why you're finding now that large dams are actually creating floods and creating droughts. And when the power is needed, they're not available. This is not just the Northeast, this is across India.
Hmm.
The bottom line is that environmental protection is actually not just patriotism in action, it's the best form of long term economics. The issue is who is interested in long term economics? The second issue is who profits and who pays.
Right. Right. So, the second question that I have for you is, how can we break from these traditional industrial methods or these traditional industries and forge a new path forward? Looking at two things. One is policy and action. So, policy and probably implementation on ground.
So here is the hard reality for India. Quite frankly, even now, despite recent attempts to dismember our environmental protection laws and rules, we still have some of the finest legislative uh, texts in the world. But where we fail is implementation. So let's take a very specific example. More people have migrated from urban India to rural India and cross migrated than possibly moved during independence. This has caused havoc, social unrest, social distress, financial losses, and we can bemoan our fate, but that won't do us any good. If I know the Balipara Foundation, it is a very positive organization that wishes to move forward and work on solutions on the ground using local communities as their partners. So here's a simple, straightforward strategy. It's possibly one of the only strategies that will work over the next decade in India. The people who have migrated from urban India to rural India right now, they don't need jobs 1,000 miles away, 2,000 miles away. They're not going to come. They need jobs where they are. What better way to put them to work than to ask them to help repair the catchments of large dams? And these are not just forests, these are catchments. Catchments is wherever the rain falls and the land holds it and catches the rain and then channels it through rivers, through lakes, or feeds aquifers. Those are catchments. If we enhance the catchments using manual labor, then we will find two, three things happening straight away. The billions of dollars that we spend right now subsidizing banks, subsidizing large industries, subsidizing coal, subsidizing oil, and subsidizing all the things that cause the problem, if that money were to be allocated towards directly giving people the money who live at the lower end of the economic ladder, but in the geography where the catchments are, then doing soil and moisture conservation work, contour, bund, subsurface dams, small projects, repairing. In other words, I'm saying the investment we put into the 4,000 large dams that we have built or building in India today, if those investments were instead to be put into making the existing investments deliver the benefits that we originally wanted, there's no better way to do it than to employ people, improve the catchments, staunch the rain, feed the aquifers, which feed the wells, which improve farm production, and by the way, collateral benefit, enhance biodiversity, including soil microflora and fauna, and I mean, control floods, control droughts, and the cherry on the pie is that this can't be done. It can't physically. Science will not allow us to do this without pulling atmospheric carbon down. So we have a win-win. But the problem is the win-win is distributed over 30 million people, not 7 people who are currently in control and have got the economy by the neck and say, we want our next quarter profit up. That is not rural futures. That is rural death. And that is not just rural death. It will destroy the very economies of those corporates or those planners or those politicians or those bureaucrats or those misguided human beings who believe that they are more powerful, smarter than, and can improve upon the systems that nature has honed through evolution down the years. These are lessons that have been understood by people who really have gone into it with a tooth comb. But those people who are superficially saying, "Mujhe agle saal ka profit nahi milega to kya hai, jahannam mein jao to," that kind of seat of the pants, muscular, I will do what I want because I'm powerful, those days have gone. In fact, if you ask me today, the cheapest form of energy on planet Earth is solar energy. Now, I'm not saying everything turns to solar energy. I'm saying, why should I be using thermal plants fired by coal to have my lights on? Why should I be using those to have traffic lights on in the cities? Why should I not be able to use solar power to charge the batteries that run the cars and therefore not use petroleum to do so? So we have to make choices. And those of us who are advocating this, we don't expect that we advocate it in the year 2020 and it happens in 2021. This is going to take time. Edward Goldsmith, the late Edward Goldsmith, the editor of The Ecologist and an original thinker, said long ago, there are no V turns. It's always a U turn. And we are on the U turn now. We can either do this thing in a way that makes it possible for us to live and enjoy life, or we can traumatize ourselves by creating social unrest, by cornering all the assets and all the resources in one place and starving millions on the other. Rural futures. The Eastern Himalaya is a place, it's an arena that is going to show not only India but the world how we can have our cake and eat it too if we work with nature-based solutions.
Right, 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 absolutely, sir. Maybe I can ask you one more question if that's fine by you.
Yeah.
Um, so, sir, how can we sort of capitalize and propagate this new growth that we are talking about, this U-turn that we are talking about in terms of conserving our environment, and at the same time looking at a new form of economy which is very equitable and inclusive in nature. Um, what are the types of investments and macroeconomic level concepts that we can bring in to make it more holistic in nature? Because, like you rightly said, so I think everything is very narrow-minded. It's like a chicken neck because a few people only have the power in their hands. So how do we make it larger than life by making everyone feel that yes, everyone has a say in this conservation process. Everyone has a say in how we want to envision uh, the climate crisis process and how do we sort of restore planet Earth. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the first thing I think is that we all know what has to be done. We all know now what the problem is, why it has occurred, and we should stop talking about it and start implementing it. And that implementation is easier said than done. What I just spoke to you about, for instance, large dams, and how we can put maybe 20 to 30 million people to work using NREGA, tribal subplans, and all these various devices and monies that we have to improve the lot of those at the bottom end of the ladder, the impact of that is actually an answer to the question that you just asked. What do we do? We can start applying this across not just catchments of dams. Let's take coastal India, 7,000 plus square kilometers. We are destroying mangroves to build housing colonies. Now, those mangroves are the feeding grounds not only of the fishermen who live in India, but they are the ones that from Sundarbans, they are the ones that are feeding people in Thailand. These are the nurseries of the ocean. These are the nurseries of the planet. They are also the largest, possibly the largest repositories of carbon sinks. We don't know what the value of our nature capital is. And Ranjit Barthakur has been crying himself hoarse now for 2 decades and saying this. But whether it's Ranjit Barthakur or Bitu Saigal or whoever it is who's articulating this, 20 years ago, it was just a small little skin rash and then you put a little something over it. And now it's turning into a cancer. The body of the Indian subcontinent is being consumed by us. And we just have to learn that we can't do this thing forever. And nature will give us no judgments. It will only give us warnings and consequences. if we don't recognize the warnings, it's like, how shall I tell you? You know, if I am saying something that is unpopular
Mhm.
for a small coterie of people who have got the nation by the throat and are causing the thrombosis, then at some point or the other, we will have to find ourselves in a situation where instead of doing it peacefully, it will be done by force. Not force of humans against humans, but force of nature against us. Nature will force us to kneel. It is already forcing us to kneel. I want to just end on one simple thing. Let's talk about the pandemic. How did it come about? The pandemic came about because bats, which carried a virus for many years, began to be consumed. Now the viruses escaped from the bats. That's one part of the story. But that's not all. There were pangolins. Pangolins are now the most heavily trafficked mammals in the world. The pangolins acted as intermediate hosts for the COVID-19 virus. What happened here was that it then it ran out of control, and it came, instead of the viruses using the pangolins as hosts, zoonotic diseases made us human beings, homo sapiens, such a large quantity of meat available for the virus. It came to us. Now there were all these viruses and their hosts were locked down in the ecosystems that Ranjit Bharthakur has been trying to protect for the last 20 years. Now, what has happened by unleashing them, they have come out into our ecosystem and we have got locked down together with our economy. So, it is you young people who must understand this, that my generation is actually colonizing yours and has been colonizing yours since independence. The British left. At that point, we should have listened to Gandhi, who said that, look, the best thing you can do is, he said at that point, please, before you do anything, find out whether it will affect or improve the lives of the poorest of the poor. If he were alive today, he wouldn't say that. He would say, check and see whether a child today, rich or poor, black or white, north or south, fat or thin, whether that child's life will be improved 30 years from today. If that child's life will be improved, believe me, our life will be improved. And in the process of doing that, our economy will improve. A nation that is currently at the edge of ecological despair will fix itself because nature fixes itself. It's actually very simple. It's been made complicated. In places like Paris, when people go across for COP21 and then it'll go to COP31 and then 41, promises are made to be broken because the coteries that have learned to exploit our limited resources and get rich and put their balance sheet figures up, they are the ones who are, it's like foxes looking after chickens. But you young people, you're neither foxes nor are you chickens. You should just be happy human beings living on a planet that is magical, just the right distance from the sun, self repairing like a cut on your hand. Everything can be fixed. Everything can be fixed. Just temper a little ambition and keep those four horsemen of the apocalypse at bay: arrogance, ignorance, avarice, all in a soup of apathy. Dispel with this, we will be fine. Your life will be fine. I promise you that.
Thank you. Thank you once again. I mean, you were there for Kids for Tigers at Sarla Birla when I was in school. So,
That's right.
uh,
Wow. So listen, my beta, listen to me. Listen to me. You have to believe, like religion, that everything will work out. But you can't keep quiet. This is not a spectator sport. I can assure you that the silent majority will become the silenced majority soon. And that won't be a very pretty sight. What happened in Syria was, Syria, by the way, is where women invented agriculture 10 or 11,000 years ago. It took only 4 consecutive droughts for a huge migration to take place. And they called it a Shia Sunni problem when social stress came away. It wasn't Shia Sunni. There was no water to give to my child. So it had to happen. Now, what is happening in India today It's not just the migration from urban to rural India. I'm telling you that from Bangladesh and from 24 Parganas, South West Bengal, probably between 6 million people will begin a domino displacement northward, and sea levels rise, and salt will become the major enemy because kidneys and salt, they don't go together.
Yeah.
So we'll have migrations from there. Our coastal aquifers are going to be salinized. Our glaciers are melting, yet we are investing close to $1 trillion on building dams and roads in the Northeast that won't work. All our existing dams, we are allowing them to be silted. It's not for environmentalists to fix all this. It is for the economists, it is for the politicians, it's for the bureaucrats, it's for the businessmen, it's for those who currently wield power to realize that you cannot drive a Ferrari that has a broken steering wheel, a jammed accelerator and no brakes and no rear view mirror.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
actually that simple.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Anyway, take care. Be
I
good.
will, sir.
Let me know how else I can help, okay?
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
We do not inherit earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. This proverb could not have been truer than it is now. As per the Global Risk Report 2020, for the first time in the history, environmental factors like climate action failure, extreme weather, natural disasters, biodiversity loss, and man-made environmental disasters dominate 8 out of the 10 risks. This year, bushfires in Australia alone have claimed around 1 billion animal lives. This is a massive wake-up call for all of us. According to Edelman Trust Barometer 2020, majority of people are still expecting businesses to solve societal problems. And therefore, it is in the self-interest of businesses to behave responsibly and gain the trust of society at large. When I speak of longevity, it is only natural that the Tata Group would come to our mind. Some time back, a sudden surge in hunting of the whale sharks was pushing this species towards extinction. Despite being granted the highest legal protection, saving the whale shark needed a massive attitudinal shift among the coastal fishing community at the west coast of India. Our chemical company, Tata Chemicals, partnered with Wildlife Trust of India, the Gujarat State Forest Department, and the International Fund for Animal Welfare to launch the Save the Whale Shark campaign. Working with a much revered spiritual leader, we positioned the whale shark as Wahali, a dear one, likening its return to the coastline to breed to the return of a beloved daughter in the family. This invoked a strong response, ultimately eradicating shark poaching as well as rescue and release of around 800 whale sharks in the last few years. In these times of intense and unprecedented global crisis, with the combined impact of environmental disasters, a giant pandemic that has shaken us all like never before, we all in the business world need to bring sustainability into the core strategy of our enterprise and work with a deep sense of responsibility. I think this is what the society at large expects us to do, and we must deliver.